Dad stole my college fund for my stepsister, so my grandparents gave me $1 million. Now Dad is demanding I share, and family says I'm tearing us apart. You ever find out something so messed up that you just sit there, staring at the wall, questioning your entire life? Yeah, that was me when I learned my dad gave my entire college fund, money my mom had set aside before she passed, to my stepsister, Olivia. I didn't even find out in some dramatic, yelling match or anything. No, I found out by accident. I was filling out financial aid forms for college, and when I checked the balance of the account my mom had been contributing to for years, it was empty. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a bank error? Maybe I was checking the wrong account? Nope. My dad, Eric, had transferred every single penny out a year after my mom died. All $85,000 of it. And where did it go? Straight into Olivia's tuition. For context, Olivia is my stepmom's daughter. She's a year older than me and has always been the golden child in my dad's eyes. I didn't hate her or anything, but we weren't exactly close. And now, apparently, she was unknowingly walking around campus with my college fund. When I confronted my dad, he didn't even try to deny it. His exact words? Well, Olivia needed it more than you did. You're smart, you'll figure something out. That was it. That was his entire justification for taking my mom's hard-earned savings and handing it over to someone she barely knew. I was speechless. Then I was furious. But mostly, I was lost. Because now, I had no idea how I was going to pay for school. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of the madness. After my dad basically shrugged off what he did, I had no idea what to do. I spent the next few days just numb, trying to figure out my options. Community college? Loans? Taking a gap year? Nothing felt fair, but what choice did I have? Then my grandparents, my mom's parents, James and Linda, called me out of the blue. They asked how the college process was going, and I really didn't want to tell them. They had always been so proud of my mom for saving up for my future, and I knew this would break their hearts. But when my grandma pressed me, I cracked. I told her everything. Silence. Then my grandpa spoke, and I could hear the barely contained rage in his voice. He did what? I explained again, apologizing like an idiot because I felt like I had somehow let them down. My grandma was already crying. My grandpa was quiet for a second, and then he just said, "Come to the house this weekend." So I did. The second I walked in, my grandpa hugged me, this deep, solid hug like he was trying to make up for everything all at once. My grandma, on the other hand, was livid. I had never seen her so angry before. She kept pacing, muttering about lawyers and betrayal. And then, completely out of nowhere, my grandpa says, "We're fixing this." I had no idea what that meant at the time. But I was about to find out. That weekend, I sat in my grandparents' living room, still trying to wrap my head around how angry they were. I mean, I was furious too, but the way my grandma kept pacing and muttering? The way my grandpa was staring out the window like he was calculating something? It felt like I had just set off a nuclear chain reaction. Then, my grandpa sat down across from me and said something that made my brain short-circuit. "We're giving you $1 million. I actually laughed. Because obviously, I misheard him, right? But nope. He was dead serious. Turns out, my grandparents were loaded. I always knew they were comfortable, but I had no idea they were millionaires. My grandpa had spent decades running a successful business, and my grandma came from old money. They had always lived modestly, and my mom was the same way, so I never thought much about it. But now they were done being modest. "This is what your mother would have wanted," my grandma said, her voice still shaking with anger. "That money was supposed to be yours. We can't take back what your father did, but we sure as hell can make things right." I sat there, absolutely stunned. They wanted to give me enough money to pay for any college I wanted, graduate debt-free, and still have plenty left over. I told them it was too much. That I couldn't just take that kind of money. But my grandpa just shook his head. "This isn't charity, kid. This is justice." At that moment, I felt this overwhelming mix of gratitude, relief, and something else, vindication. My dad had stolen from me, but now, thanks to my grandparents, he hadn't actually taken anything in the end. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because just when I was starting to feel like things were finally turning around, my dad found out. And he showed up. I was still reeling from my grandparents' insane generosity when, out of nowhere, my dad showed up at their house. I hadn't told him anything, so how did he even know? The moment I opened the door, I knew something was off. My dad, Eric, wasn't his usual smug, dismissive self. No, this time he looked furious. His face was red, his jaw clenched, and his hands were balled into fists at his sides. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming here?" he demanded, pushing past me into the house like he owned the place. Before I could even react, my grandpa walked into the room, completely unfazed. He just folded his arms and stared my dad down. "Because he doesn't have to report to you, Eric," my grandpa said coldly. My dad scoffed. "Oh, cut the act. I know you gave him money." And that was when it clicked. Olivia must have told him. I hadn't said a word, but she and I had mutual friends, and apparently she had overheard something about my grandparents helping me out. She must have run straight to my dad, and now here he was, acting like I had stolen something from him. "You gave him $1 million?" My dad's voice was thick with disbelief. "Are you insane? That's family money. That belongs to all of us." My grandma actually laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "No, Eric. This is our money. And we're giving it to our grandson. The same grandson you stole from." That shut him up for a second, but then he turned back to me. "You're really going to keep all of that for yourself? You're not going to share any of it with your family?" That's when I realized what he was really here for. He didn't care that I was taken care of, he cared that he and Olivia weren't getting a cut. And he wasn't going to let this go. I just stood there, trying to process what my dad had just said. Share? With him? With Olivia? The same people who had zero problem taking every penny my mom saved for me? I let out a small laugh, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe the audacity of this man. "You mean like how you shared my college fund with me?" I shot back. His jaw tightened. "That was different," he muttered. "Olivia needed help. You weren't in college yet." It made sense at the time. I looked at him, waiting for the part where he realized how ridiculous he sounded. But nope. He really thought he had done nothing wrong. "And now I need help," I said slowly. "But instead of screwing over someone else, my grandparents actually care enough to help me. And you think I owe you for that?" My dad took a step closer, lowering his voice like he was trying to reason with me. "Look, I get that you're upset, but think about this. College is expensive, yeah, but do you really need all that money? That's more than enough to help out your family. Olivia still has tuition to pay. Your stepmom and I are struggling too. This could help all of us." I swear, my grandpa was this close to decking him. Instead, he just exhaled sharply and stepped in between us. "Eric, let me make one thing clear," he said, his voice deadly calm. "You took what wasn't yours. We made it right. And if you think for 1 second that you're getting a dime of this money, you're out of your damn mind." My dad's face turned an even deeper shade of red. He opened his mouth to argue again, but my grandma cut him off. "You need to leave. Now." Dad's eyes flickered between me and my grandparents, like he was still trying to figure out a way to manipulate the situation. But when he saw none of us were budging, he let out a frustrated sigh and turned toward the door. "Fine," he snapped. "But don't expect me to bail you out when you blow through all that money." And just like that, he was gone. I should have felt relieved. But something told me this wasn't over. For the next few days, I kept waiting for my dad to try something. A guilt trip, a fake apology, maybe even a legal threat. But instead? Silence. That should have been a good thing. But knowing my dad, it just meant he was planning something. And I was right. One night I got a text from my stepmom, Karen. We hadn't talked much since all this went down, so I was already suspicious. It just said, "Hey, can we talk? Just us?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small diner, and she was all smiles at first, like she was trying to act like everything was normal. But the moment we sat down, she hit me with, "Eric is really upset. This whole situation is putting a strain on our family. I was hoping we could work something out." I just stared at her. "A strain on your family? What about me? What about the fact that her husband stole from his own son? What exactly do you want me to do?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. She sighed like she was so exhausted from having to deal with all this, then said, "Eric feels like this isn't fair. If you just gave Olivia a small portion, just enough to cover the rest of her tuition, things could go back to normal." I almost laughed. Of course, this was about Olivia again. "So let me get this straight," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "My dad steals from me, my grandparents step in to make sure I'm okay, And now you're asking me to give away part of their gift to the person who already got my college fund? Karen pursed her lips. It's not like that. Olivia didn't know where the money came from. It wasn't her fault. I shook my head. Then maybe she should be asking Eric for money, not me. Karen let out a long sigh, then tilted her head like she was trying to be gentle. Listen, I know this is hard, but think about the bigger picture. If you don't help, Eric might never forgive you. This could ruin your relationship with your father forever. And there it was. The real reason she wanted to meet me alone. This was an ultimatum. Give Olivia money or lose my dad for good. I took a deep breath, leaned forward and said, Then I guess he's already gone. Karen looked genuinely shocked. Like she had expected me to cave. When I didn't, she just shook her head and muttered, You're making a mistake. But I wasn't. I was finally standing up for myself. And I knew this wasn't the last I'd hear from them. I thought shutting down Karen's ultimatum would be the end of it. That maybe, just maybe, my dad would finally get the hint and move on. I should have known better. A week later, I got a letter in the mail, from a lawyer. At first I thought it had to be a mistake. But nope. Right there, in black and white, was a letter stating that my dad was considering legal action if I didn't fairly distribute the money my grandparents gave me. I had to read it 3 times to believe it. Apparently, my dad was trying to argue that because my grandparents' money was family wealth, I had no right to keep it all for myself. He wanted me to either give him a reasonable portion, or he'd take me to court. I was furious. The man had already taken my college fund for Olivia, and now he wanted to take even more from me? And he actually thought he had a legal case? I immediately called my grandpa, shaking with anger as I read the letter to him. He didn't even sound surprised. I was waiting for this, he said calmly. What do we do? I asked. My grandpa chuckled. We lawyer up. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my grandparents' attorney's office, going over every ridiculous claim my dad was trying to make. And the best part? He didn't have a single legal leg to stand on. Your father has no claim to this money. The lawyer told me. It was a gift, given to you directly. He can threaten all he wants, but he doesn't have a case. That should have made me feel better. And in a way it did. But I also knew my dad hated losing. If the lawyer shut him down, he wouldn't just back off. He'd try something else. And I was right. Because the next thing I knew, Olivia was calling me. The moment I saw Olivia's name pop up on my phone, I knew exactly why she was calling. She never reached out to me, not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even just to check in. And now, suddenly, after my dad tried and failed to shake me down legally, she wanted to talk? I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text popped up. Hey, can we talk? Please. It's important. I sighed. Part of me wanted to ignore her forever, but a small part was curious. Was she going to try the same guilt trip? Was she even aware of what our dad had done behind the scenes? So, against my better judgment, I called her back. She picked up immediately. Hey, she said, her voice overly cheerful. Thanks for calling me back. I didn't bother with small talk. What do you want, Olivia? She hesitated, then sighed like this was so difficult for her. Look, I know things have been tense lately, but I just wanted to say, I had no idea where the money for my tuition came from. If I had known, I would have told you. I stayed silent, waiting for the real reason she called. And sure enough, she continued. I'm in a really bad spot right now. Dad's losing it over this whole thing, and now I'm stuck in the middle. He says he might not be able to cover the rest of my tuition, and I'm freaking out. I only have a year left, and I don't know what I'm going to do. There it was. So what are you asking, Olivia? I said flatly. I'm not asking for anything. She rushed to say. I thought maybe you'd want to help. You got all that money, and I know it's not my right to ask, but we're family, right? I almost laughed. Family? I repeated. You mean like how Dad treated me like family when he stole my college fund for you? She flinched. I didn't know. But you still took it. I said. You never once questioned where it came from, never thought to ask. And now that Dad's plan didn't work, you expect me to bail you out? She was quiet for a long time. Then, in a much smaller voice, she said, So you're really not going to help me? I took a deep breath. No, Olivia. I'm not. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She just let out a shaky breath and said, "Okay. I see how it is." Then she hung up. And just like that, I knew this wasn't over. Because my dad, he was never going to accept defeat. If my dad wanted to make this a public spectacle, then fine, I'd give him a show. I spent the next hour carefully putting together everything. Screenshots of my drained college fund. The lawyer's letter where he tried to demand a cut of my grandparents' money. Texts from Karen and Olivia, both trying to guilt me into handing over cash. And then I wrote my own post. Since my dad wants to tell his side of the story, let me tell mine. I laid out everything. How my mom had worked hard to save for my college fund, only for my dad to steal it after she died. How he gave it all to Olivia without even telling me. How my grandparents had to step in to fix what he broke. And most importantly, how my dad was now throwing a tantrum because I wouldn't let him rob me again. Then I attached the screenshots. I hit post. And the fallout was immediate. Some family members, the ones who had been blindly defending my dad, went silent. A few even quietly deleted their comments under his post. But others? Oh, they turned on him. Wait, he stole your college fund? So you were never greedy, you were just getting back what was yours? Eric, is this true? This is a huge thing to leave out. And my dad? He lost it. He started replying to comments, trying to backtrack, saying it wasn't that simple. And that I was twisting things. But the damage was done. People weren't buying it anymore. Then, out of nowhere, he deleted his entire post. But it was too late. The truth was out. And for the first time ever, he was the one backed into a corner. I thought maybe, finally, he'd give up. But instead, he showed up at my door. I had barely processed the fact that my dad had deleted his Facebook post when, bam, 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 someone started pounding on my apartment door. I already knew who it was. I took a deep breath before opening the door. And there he was, my dad, standing in the hallway, his face red with anger. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped the second I opened the door. "You humiliated me in front of the entire family." I folded my arms. "I just told the truth, Dad. You did that to yourself." "No, you made me look like a monster," he shouted, stepping inside without being invited. "You made it sound like I stole from you. I was just trying to take care of my family." "I was your family," I interrupted. "Mom was your family. And you threw us aside the second it was convenient for you." He opened his mouth, then closed it, his jaw clenching. For the first time, he actually looked guilty. "Look, maybe I handled things badly," he muttered. "But you need to understand, Olivia was struggling. Karen was struggling. I had to make a choice." I stared at him. "And you did make a choice. You chose them. You chose to steal from your own son. And now that you're facing the consequences, you expect me to fix it?" He ran a hand over his face, frustrated. I thought we could work something out. That you'd understand. That you wouldn't turn your back on me over money." I let out a short laugh. "That's rich, coming from you." He exhaled sharply, looking around my apartment like he was still searching for an angle. And then, he went for his final move. "You really want to throw away your relationship with me over this?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "Because once you close this door, that's it. You won't have a father anymore." I stared at him for a long moment. Then I stepped back and closed the door in his face. For a few seconds, I could hear him breathing heavily on the other side. Then, without another word, he walked away. And just like that, he was gone. I should have felt relieved. But instead, I just felt free. After I shut the door on my dad, I expected to feel some kind of regret. Some nagging voice in the back of my head telling me I made a mistake. But instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time since my mom passed, I wasn't waiting for my dad's approval. I wasn't hoping he'd do the right thing. I wasn't letting him guilt-trip me into fixing his mistakes. I was done. I blocked his number. Blocked Karen. Even Olivia. I wasn't about to let them sneak their way back into my life. And for a few weeks, everything was quiet. I started making real plans for college. My grandparents helped me look into investments for the rest of the money. I finally felt secure for the first time in my life. But then, just when I thought it was over, my landlord called me. "Hey," he said, sounding uncomfortable. "I don't know what's going on, but your father came by the building today." My stomach dropped. "What?" I asked. "Why?" I'm not sure, my landlord admitted. He was asking about your lease. Wanted to know if he was still listed as an emergency contact. Said he was worried about you. That was bull. My dad hadn't checked in on me in years. And now, suddenly, after I cut him off, he was concerned? I thanked my landlord and hung up, my heart racing. I had no idea what my dad was up to. But one thing was clear. He wasn't done with me yet. After my landlord's call, I knew I had to stay on guard. My dad wasn't the type to just let things go. If he couldn't guilt me, threaten me, or sue me, he'd try something else. And sure enough, he did. A few days later, I got a call from my bank. "Hi, Mr. Tyler," the woman on the phone said. "We just need to verify a recent request to change the contact information and withdrawal permissions on your account." "My what?" "I didn't make any changes," I said immediately, my stomach dropping. "What exactly was requested?" There was a pause before she said, "Someone claiming to be your father called, saying he was still a financial guardian on your account. He requested access so he could help manage your funds." I saw red. My dad was trying to get into my bank account. The money my grandparents gave me. The money he had no right to. "Did he get access?" I asked, my voice shaking. "No," the banker said firmly. "We have strict security measures for these types of changes, and since your account is fully in your name, he has no authority over it. But we wanted to alert you since this was an unusual request." I took a deep breath. "Thank you for letting me know. Please put a note on my account that no one but me is allowed to make changes. And if my dad tries this again, call me immediately." After I hung up, I just sat there, hands clenched into fists. He was really this desperate. He had tried to steal from me again, and when that didn't work, he tried to manipulate my bank into giving him access. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't just cutting him off anymore. I was going to make sure he could never pull something like this again. The second I hung up with the bank, I called my grandpa. "He tried to access my account," I said, my voice still shaking with anger. "He actually called my bank and pretended he had control over my money." There was silence on the other end. Then my grandpa sighed. "I figured he might try something like this," he said. "We need to take extra steps to protect you." And that's exactly what we did. That same day, my grandpa took me to his lawyer and financial advisor. They helped me lock everything down, my bank accounts, my investments, even my lease. My dad would never be able to access a single cent of my money. But that wasn't all. We also sent a legal notice to my dad, making it crystal clear that if he ever tried to impersonate me, access my finances, or harass me again, we would take legal action. I was done playing defense. By the time everything was in place, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: safe. For once, my dad had no power over me. No money to control. No guilt to weaponize. And just like that, he lost. At least, that's what I thought. Because a week later, he sent me one final message. A week after shutting him out completely, I thought maybe, just maybe, my dad had finally given up. Then, out of nowhere, an email popped up in my inbox. From Eric, Dad. Subject: one last chance. I hesitated before opening it. Part of me wanted to just delete it, block him on everything, and move on. But curiosity got the best of me. And honestly, I'm glad I read it. The email started off with some fake niceties. "I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking a lot about our family and what's happened." Then, he got to the real reason he was writing. "I understand that mistakes were made on both sides, but cutting me off like this is extreme. You've put a wall between us, and I don't think that's what your mother would have wanted. Nice touch, Dad, trying to guilt me using my dead mom. I'm willing to put this all behind us if you just consider sharing some of what you were given. Nothing unreasonable, just enough to help your family. If you refuse, I'll have no choice but to assume you never truly cared about us." I actually laughed out loud reading that last part. He still thought he could guilt-trip me. That I'd be scared of losing him when he was the one who had pushed me away over and over. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I just forwarded the email to my grandparents and blocked his address. And that was it. No more calls. No more Facebook drama. No more schemes. For the first time in years, I was free. Now, I'm in college, fully paid for with the money my grandparents wanted me to have. I've got savings, investments, and peace of mind. My dad? I have no clue what he's doing, and I don't care. Because I finally realized something. Family isn't about blood. It's about who actually cares about you. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't have a dad anymore.